Lunch rush, 12:37 p.m. Naomi Reed has $63.17 in her apron, every cent already spoken for. Rent overdue, lights on the edge of shut-off, her little brother expecting dinner she hasn't figured out how to afford. One mistake, and her manager, locked on table 7, will cut her loose. Then she notices them. 2 men by the door, untouched plates, eyes fixed on her like she's the only thing in the room. One taps his phone twice. Deliberate, precise. Naomi keeps moving, balancing 3 plates, pretending not to see, because seeing could cost her everything. Then a hand closes around her wrist. Not forceful, unavoidable. "You're in danger," the man beside her murmurs. "Pretend I'm your husband." Her breath catches. If he's wrong, she loses her job. If he's right, she loses far more. "Smile," he says, sliding his hand into hers. Naomi does. What she doesn't know? This man isn't a stranger. And those men didn't come for food. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The fluorescent lights hum to life as Naomi Reed unlocked the front door of Lorraine's diner at 4:45 a.m. Her fingers trembled slightly as she counted last night's tips on the counter. $12.35. Not enough. Never enough. She spread out the bills beside her tips. Rent notice with a final warning. 3 medical collection notices from her mother's cancer treatments, and a certified letter about unpaid property taxes on the small house she'd inherited. The numbers blurred together in the harsh early morning light. Earlier that morning, she'd stood in her dim kitchen, stirring a pot of oatmeal for Isaiah. She'd added the last of the brown sugar and a splash of milk to make it special, watching her 17-year-old brother devour it while half asleep at their scratched kitchen table. "The electric bill's due Friday," Isaiah had mumbled between bites. "I've got it covered," Naomi had replied, ignoring the hollow feeling in her own stomach. She always skipped breakfast to make sure Isaiah had enough. "Just focus on school, okay?" Now, in the quiet diner, Naomi moved through her opening routine with practiced efficiency. She brewed fresh coffee, filled salt shakers, and wiped down every surface until it gleamed. The work kept her mind off her growling stomach. At 6 sharp, old Mr. Peterson shuffled in and took his usual booth by the window. His gnarled hands clutched an official-looking envelope. "Morning, Mr. Peterson." Naomi poured his coffee without being asked. "Need help with that letter?" His weathered face creased with relief. "Would you mind, dear? These eyes aren't what they used to be." Naomi sat down across from him, carefully unfolding the letter. She read slowly about his medication changes, explaining each part in simple terms while he nodded along. When she finished, he patted her hand with tears in his eyes. "Don't know what we'd do without you, Naomi. You're just like your mama was, always taking care of everybody." The morning rush hit hard at 7. The cook, Tony, showed up looking dead on his feet after caring for his sick daughter all night. Without a word, Naomi jumped on the grill herself, letting him take a 20-minute power nap in the break room. "Girl, you can't keep covering for everyone," Lorraine said, appearing beside her at the grill. The older woman's face was etched with concern. "When's the last time you took a real break?" "I'm fine," Naomi insisted, flipping pancakes with one hand while pouring coffee with the other. "Tony needs the rest more than I do. Besides, I need all the hours I can get." Near 8, a young mother came in with her little girl, who couldn't have been more than 6. The child's eyes lit up at the sight of pancakes, but when it came time to pay, the mother's face fell as she counted her money twice. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, cheeks flushing. "I thought I had enough." "It's already taken care of," Naomi said smoothly, sliding her own tip money into the register when no one was looking. The grateful smile on the little girl's face was worth missing lunch again. During a rare, quiet moment, Naomi stood at the window, staring in the direction of her mother's house. Her house, now. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and the garden her mother had loved was overrun with weeds. But in her mind, Naomi could see it transformed. Fresh paint, sturdy steps, flowers blooming again. A real home for Isaiah to come back to during college breaks, if she could ever afford to send him. The bell above the door chimed, snapping her out of her daydream. A man in an expensive suit walked in, his shoes clicking against the linoleum. Naomi's shoulders tensed. He'd been coming by regularly, leaving messages about urgent property matters that needed her signature. "Miss Reed," he said, voice slick as oil. "I have the papers right here. Just a simple formality to clean up some title issues. If you'd just sign—" "I'm working," Naomi cut him off politely but firmly. "And like I said before, I don't sign anything I haven't had time to read and understand." His smile tightened. He left another business card on the counter. "This really can't wait much longer. We'll be in touch." The rest of her shift passed in a blur of coffee refills, orders called out, and dishes cleared. By the time Naomi hung up her apron at 4, her feet were throbbing and her back ached. The walk home took 20 minutes, past boarded-up storefronts and empty lots where houses used to stand. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across cracked sidewalks. A dark sedan was parked near her house, engine idling. As she watched, it pulled away slowly, but the feeling of being watched prickled between her shoulder blades. Naomi hurried up her worn front steps, fumbling with her key before slipping inside. The house was quiet. Isaiah wouldn't be home from basketball practice for another hour. She leaned against the door, trying to steady her breathing, surrounded by the fading wallpaper and creaking floors of her mother's dream. Morning light crept through the diner's windows, but it did nothing to ease the knot in Naomi's stomach. She'd barely slept after seeing that dark sedan, jumping at every creak in the old house. Even Isaiah had noticed, asking if she was okay before heading to school. "You're dropping plates everywhere," Lorraine said, steadying a wobbling stack of dishes in Naomi's hands. "What's got you so rattled?" "Just tired," Naomi replied, forcing a smile. She couldn't explain the crawling sensation between her shoulders, the feeling of being watched that hadn't left since yesterday. The lunch rush brought its usual chaos, truckers wanting quick meals, office workers on short breaks, regulars who liked their booths just so. Naomi moved through it all on autopilot, pouring coffee and taking orders with practiced efficiency. The bell chimed at 12:30. A broad-shouldered man entered, his movements measured and precise. He surveyed the room before choosing a booth against the back wall, positioning himself to see both exits. Something about him seemed coiled tight, like a spring waiting to release. Naomi approached with her coffee pot. Up close, she noticed more details: the military straight posture, the watchful eyes that tracked movement, the way his hands stayed visible on the table. He wasn't like their usual customers who slumped over their phones or newspapers. "Coffee?" she asked. He nodded once, eyes still scanning the room. "Black, please." The bell chimed again. Naomi's hand trembled slightly as she poured, nearly spilling when she recognized the clicking footsteps behind her. The man in the expensive suit, the one who'd been pressuring her about the house, was back. He chose a seat by the door, effectively blocking the main exit. "Can I get you anything else?" Naomi asked the broad-shouldered stranger, trying to keep her voice steady. "Not yet." His reply was quiet, controlled. She noticed his eyes narrow slightly as they followed the suited man's movements. For the next hour, Naomi worked around a growing sense of dread. The suited man watched her constantly, his polished smile never reaching his eyes. He'd positioned himself perfectly to corner her when her shift ended. She'd seen him checking the back alley earlier. Her usual escape route was probably covered, too. When the broad-shouldered man's cup ran low, Naomi returned with the coffee pot. As she leaned in to pour, he spoke so softly only she could hear. "You're in danger. Pretend I'm your husband." Before she could process his words, he stood in one fluid motion. His hand caught hers, warm and steady. "Thanks, baby," he said, voice carrying clearly across the diner. "Sorry I've been gone so long." Naomi's heart hammered. The suited man's face had changed instantly, his practiced smile vanishing into something cold and hard. She read the threat there, and the frustration at finding her not alone. Training kicked in, years of customer service helping her maintain a natural smile. "I'm just glad you're home," she managed, the words coming out surprisingly steady. The broad-shouldered man, her supposed husband, pulled her gently closer. She caught a glimpse of a chain around his neck, something metallic glinting beneath his collar. His thumb brushed across her knuckles in what looked like an intimate gesture, but felt like silent reassurance. "Naomi!" Lorraine's voice boomed across the diner. "Why didn't you tell me your man was coming by today?" The older woman approached their table, her acting barely concealing her protective instincts. "We've heard so much about you, young man. About time you showed up to take care of our girl." "Had some things to finish up first," he replied smoothly. "But I'm here now." Naomi felt the suited man's stare burning into her back. The broad-shouldered stranger must have noticed too, because he shifted slightly, placing himself between her and the threat. "Won't you join us, Lorraine?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes alert. "I'd love to hear about how Naomi's been doing." "Of course, of course." Lorraine pulled up a chair, launching into a story about Naomi's first day at the diner. Her chatter filled the space, making their tableau look natural to anyone watching. Under the table, the stranger slipped something cool and metal into Naomi's palm. A ring. Without missing a beat, she slid it onto her finger, completing their hastily assembled lie. The suited man stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The sound made several customers look up. He straightened his tie, composure returning like a mask sliding back into place. "Another time, then," he said, the words carrying a clear threat despite his smooth tone. He walked out, each step measured and unhurried. The moment he was gone, Naomi grabbed the stranger's arm and practically dragged him toward the storeroom. Coffee cups rattled as they passed, her fingers digging into his sleeve. "Who are you?" she demanded as soon as they were alone among the shelves of supplies. "How did you know?" The storeroom's single bulb cast harsh shadows across his face as he turned to face her, and Naomi realized she'd just pulled a complete stranger, one clearly dangerous in his own way, into a confined space. But somehow, the tension coiled in her muscles wasn't from fear of him. She needed answers, and she needed them now. The storeroom's harsh fluorescent light buzzed overhead as Naomi faced the stranger who'd just pretended to be her husband. Her heart was still racing, but anger overtook fear. "Who are you?" she demanded again. "And how did you know about that man?" "My name is Elias Vance," he said quietly, keeping his distance despite the cramped space. "I'm a former Navy SEAL, and I've been tracking that enforcer for weeks." "Enforcer?" Naomi's fingers twisted the unfamiliar ring on her hand. "That's what they call men like him. People who pressure others into signing away their homes and businesses." Elias's voice remained low and controlled. "He works for Dorian Pike." Naomi's breath caught. Pike's name appeared on all those papers they kept pushing at her, the ones about her mother's house. "The developer?" "Developer is a polite word for what he does." Elias glanced at the storeroom door. "He buys up properties cheap, usually after making sure the owners have no choice but to sell." Through the door, they could hear Lorraine's voice carrying across the diner, telling some elaborate story about Naomi and her husband to keep curious customers occupied. "How do you know all this?" Naomi pressed. My best friend was investigating Pike's operation before he died. Something flickered across Elias's face. Old pain, barely contained. He was gathering evidence about forged documents, staged code violations, targeted harassment. Then his car went off the road one night. Police called it an accident. You don't believe that, would you? His eyes met hers. Pike's been doing this for years, buying out whole neighborhoods through shell companies, pushing out families who've lived there for generations. My friend was close to exposing everything. Naomi started to respond, but Elias's attention suddenly shifted to something behind her. He moved past her toward a shelf of cleaning supplies, reaching for a dusty frame half hidden behind paper towel rolls. Where did you get this? His voice was different now, tighter, almost shocked. Naomi turned. In his hands was an old photograph she'd seen countless times, but never really thought about. Her mother stood smiling outside the diner, next to a man Naomi didn't know. The picture had been there so long it had become almost invisible, like the faded menus and old advertisements that decorated the walls. That's my mother, she said, before she got sick. Lorraine probably put it up there years ago. And this man with her... Elias's finger traced the glass. This was my friend, the one who died investigating Pike. The storeroom seemed to shrink around them. Naomi moved closer, studying the photograph with new eyes. Her mother looked younger, healthier. She was holding what looked like paperwork. She never told me about any investigation, Naomi said slowly. But she was always so careful about documents. She made me promise never to sign anything I didn't completely understand, even if it seemed harmless. When did she pass away? 2 years ago. Cancer. Naomi swallowed hard. Left me the house and a lot of debt. Pike's people started showing up about 6 months ago, saying there were tax issues that needed to be cleared up. Simple paperwork, they said. Just sign here. But you didn't? No. I kept hearing Mom's voice in my head, warning me. Naomi wrapped her arms around herself. I thought I was being paranoid, until that man started following me. A quick knock pattern on the door made them both tense. Lorraine poked her head in. He's gone, she reported. Drove off in that fancy car of his, but he circled the block twice first. He'll be back, Elias said. And next time, he'll bring friends. What does Pike want with my mother's house? Naomi asked. It's nothing special, just a small place that needs work. Or maybe it's what's in it. Elias's expression turned thoughtful. My friend kept evidence somewhere safe. We never found it after he died. But if he was working with your mother, the implications settled over them like dust in the dim storeroom. Naomi thought of all her mother's belongings, still packed away in boxes she hadn't been able to face since the funeral. I need to get home, she said. Isaiah will be back from school soon. I'll follow at a distance, Elias said. Make sure no one's watching the house. Naomi hesitated, then slipped his ring off her finger. He shook his head. Keep it for now. We might need the cover story again. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. When closing time finally came, Naomi's hands shook as she counted out the register. Through the windows, she caught glimpses of Elias's truck parked across the street, waiting. The drive home felt endless. Every car behind her looked threatening, until she confirmed it was just Elias, maintaining a careful distance. When she finally pulled into her driveway, the street was quiet except for crickets and distant traffic. Inside, she went straight to her mother's bedroom. The closet still held stacked boxes, untouched since the day they'd packed everything away. Naomi pulled out the one marked papers and set it on the bed, her heart pounding as she broke the packing tape. She'd avoided these boxes for 2 years, but now she had no choice. Whatever her mother had been involved in, whatever she had known about Pike's schemes, the answers were probably hidden right here, in her careful files, her handwritten notes, her seemingly ordinary records of an ordinary life. Naomi lifted the lid, breathing in the faint scent of her mother's perfume that still clung to the contents. The living room lamp cast a soft glow over worn furniture and faded family photos. Naomi sat cross-legged on the carpet, surrounded by stacks of her mother's papers. Isaiah perched on the edge of the couch, his shoulders tight with tension, as he watched Elias examine another handful of documents. "I don't see why he needs to be here," Isaiah muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is family stuff." "Isaiah," Naomi warned, but her brother's scowl only deepened. "What?" "Some random guy shows up at the diner, plays pretend husband, and now we're supposed to trust him with Mom's things?" Isaiah stood up, pacing the small space between the TV and the window. "This is crazy, Naomi." Elias looked up from the papers, his expression calm. "You're right to be suspicious, but right now, your sister needs all the help she can get." "She's got me," Isaiah shot back. "She's always had me." "And you've been brave," Naomi said softly, reaching for another envelope. "But this is bigger than us now." The box between them seemed endless, stuffed with church programs dating back years, carefully bundled utility bills, recipe cards written in their mother's neat handwriting, and legal documents in manila envelopes. Nothing jumped out as obviously important. Elias spread several papers on the coffee table, arranging them in rows. "Look at these names," he said, pointing to different documents. "Martha Williams, Robert Taylor, Grace Peterson, all elderly homeowners who lost their properties in the last 2 years." Naomi leaned closer. "I remember some of them. They used to come to the diner." A memory surfaced, her mother taking calls late at night, speaking in hushed tones. "Mom would talk to them sometimes after hours. I thought they were just lonely." "They were scared," Elias said. "Pike's people probably targeted them first because they were vulnerable. Isolated." Isaiah stopped pacing. "Like that old couple on Cedar Street? They moved away last month, said they couldn't afford repairs the city demanded." "Exactly." Elias nodded. "Pike's typical pattern: use code violations as pressure, then swoop in with a lowball offer when people get desperate." Naomi reached for an old cookbook, its pages stained and dog-eared. A folded note slipped from between recipes for apple pie and pot roast. The paper was thin, the creases worn from repeated folding. In unfamiliar handwriting, it read, "If anything happens, the diner books matter. Look at this." She passed the note to Elias. His expression sharpened. "Your mother was collecting evidence," he said, "probably hiding it in plain sight, where no one would think to look." Another envelope caught Naomi's eye, a newer tax notice she hadn't seen before. The dates and amounts didn't match her records. "This says we're 3 months behind, but I've been making payments." Elias examined the document. "The pressure's being manufactured. Pike wants you out of that house before you realize what your mother knew." Isaiah dropped onto the couch, his anger cracking to reveal fear underneath. "There was a car today," he admitted quietly. "After school. Dark sedan, tinted windows. Followed me for 3 blocks before I cut through the park." Naomi's hands trembled as she reached for her brother. "Why didn't you tell me? You worry enough?" Isaiah's voice was rough. "I handled it." "This is serious," Elias said, gathering the scattered papers into neat piles. "They're escalating because they're running out of time. Whatever your mother hid, they think it's here." The room felt smaller suddenly, the shadows deeper. Naomi looked at the windows, imagining eyes in the darkness. "What do we do?" "Tonight, we secure the house." Elias stood, his training evident in how he surveyed the room. "I'll check all the locks, the windows. Make sure no one can get in without making noise." "And then what?" Isaiah demanded. "You just hang around forever?" "I'll stay in my truck tonight," Elias said. "Watch the street. Make sure you're safe while we figure out our next move." Naomi wanted to object. It felt like too much, accepting this level of protection from a stranger. But the tax notice in her hands and the memory of that enforcer's cold eyes stopped her. Just for tonight, she agreed. They watched as Elias moved methodically through the house, testing latches and examining sightlines. He showed them which windows were most vulnerable, which creaks in the floor might warn them of intruders. It should have been frightening, but his calm competence made Naomi feel safer instead. Isaiah followed him, asking questions about security that gradually became less hostile. When Elias demonstrated how to brace a door with a chair, Isaiah actually paid attention. "Keep your phones charged," Elias instructed as he prepared to head out to his truck. "Call or text if anything feels wrong. Any unusual noises, any cars passing too slowly. Better to be paranoid than sorry." Through the front window, they watched him settle into his vehicle, parked with a clear view of both the street and their house. The night pressed against the glass, but knowing he was out there made it less threatening. "I still don't trust him," Isaiah said, but his voice had lost its edge. "I know." Naomi squeezed his shoulder. "But right now, I think he's the only one who can help us understand what Mom was trying to protect." They left the porch light on, a signal and a shield against the darkness. Dawn painted the eastern sky in soft pinks and purples as Naomi stepped onto her worn front porch. 2 steaming coffee mugs warmed her hands against the morning chill. Elias sat alert in his truck, looking as though he hadn't slept at all. His eyes constantly scanned the quiet street, checking shadows and parked cars. When she approached his window, he accepted the coffee with a grateful nod. "No disturbances overnight," he reported, his voice rough from hours of silence. "You didn't have to stay." Naomi wrapped her cardigan tighter against the cool air. "We're not your responsibility." "Actually, you might be." Elias took a long sip of coffee. "Your house. It's more than just property to Pike. The documents we found last night, they suggest your mother was collecting evidence about something bigger." "What do you mean?" "Pike's not just buying random properties. He's targeting specific areas, specific owners. Your mother was tracking a pattern." He pulled out a worn notebook. "Look at these addresses. They form a corridor from the interstate right through the oldest part of town." Naomi studied the list, recognizing names of neighbors who'd mysteriously sold and moved away. A development plan? More like systematic displacement. Buy cheap from desperate people. Force others out through code violations or tax pressure. Then flip everything for luxury condos. His jaw tightened. Your house might have documentation that could expose the whole scheme. The morning sun caught Naomi's face as she processed this. That's why they won't leave us alone about signing those papers. Inside the house, she heard Isaiah moving around, getting ready for school. The familiar sounds of drawers opening, water running, cereal hitting a bowl. Normal life continuing while everything else tilted sideways. "I need to get Isaiah to school," she said. "Then work." "I'll follow at a distance," Elias replied. When she started to object, he added, "Please, until we know what we're dealing with." The drive to school was tense, with Elias's truck maintaining a discreet distance. Isaiah spotted him in the rearview mirror and frowned. "Still here, huh?" "He's trying to help," Naomi said softly. "Yeah, well, last time someone tried to help Mom, look what happened." Isaiah grabbed his backpack and slammed the car door before Naomi could respond. At the diner, morning regulars filled the booths while Lorraine worked the register. Elias took his now familiar spot with a clear view of both entrances. When the breakfast rush slowed, Lorraine pulled Naomi aside near the coffee makers. "That Pike fellow's been sniffing around here too," Lorraine admitted, her weathered hands fidgeting with a stack of napkins. "Sent one of his smooth-talking boys last week. Offered to buy me out. Said I could retire comfortable-like." Naomi's stomach dropped. "The diner too?" "Everything on this strip, seems like." Lorraine's voice hardened. "Been here 30 years. My Harold built that back booth himself. Some things ain't for sale. During a quiet moment, Naomi led Elias to the cramped office behind the kitchen. Decades of receipts, ledgers, and order books filled metal shelves. Mom used to help Lorraine with the books, she explained. Spent hours back here some nights. They started searching, careful not to disturb Lorraine's current records. Elias handled each item methodically, while Naomi relied on memory, which boxes her mother visited most often, which ledgers seemed heavier than they should be. An old order book caught her attention. The binding felt stiff, unnatural. Elias carefully peeled back the worn fabric lining, revealing a hidden pocket. Inside lay a flash drive and photocopied deed documents. "Look at these signatures," Naomi whispered, spreading the papers on Lorraine's desk. "They're all slightly different versions of the same name." Elias examined them closely. Forgeries. Good ones, but definitely fake. Your mother was building a fraud case. The reality hit Naomi hard. Her mother hadn't just been protecting their home. She'd been gathering evidence to save multiple families, an entire neighborhood's worth of people being slowly squeezed out of their homes. Pike's people must suspect these records exist, Elias said. Once they confirm we've found anything, they'll move fast. The day crawled by, tension building with each hour. Naomi served plates, filled coffee, made change. Normal actions that felt like a thin veneer over growing fear. Elias remained, ordering enough food to justify his presence, always watching. As evening approached, the diner slowly emptied. Naomi wiped down tables while Lorraine counted the register. Through the front windows, streetlights flickered on one by one, creating pools of yellow light in the gathering dusk. That's when she saw it. The dark sedan was back, parked boldly across the street. No attempt at hiding now. Just waiting, watching, making sure they knew they were being watched. Naomi's hands trembled slightly as she folded her cleaning cloth. The weight of her mother's secret evidence seemed to press against her chest. She thought of Isaiah at home, probably worried, definitely angry. She thought of Lorraine, refusing to sell her life's work. She thought of all the families who'd already been forced out, and all those still fighting to stay. The sedan's headlights flicked on, a silent message in the growing darkness. Naomi's hands shook as she turned the front door's lock. The metallic click echoed through the nearly empty diner. Only 2 regulars remained, finishing their coffee at the counter. Outside, the dark sedan idled across the street like a waiting predator. "Time to close up early, folks," Lorraine announced, her voice steady despite the tension. "Got some maintenance work to handle." Elias rose from his booth, moving with controlled purpose. "I'll check the perimeter," he said quietly to Naomi. "Stay away from the windows." While the last customers gathered their belongings, Elias slipped out the back door. Naomi watched through gaps in the blinds as he moved methodically through the shadows, checking the alley first, then the kitchen entrance. His military training showed in every precise movement. The sedan's engine revved once, headlights sweeping across the diner's front, before pulling away. By the time Elias reached the street, only red taillights remained, disappearing around the corner. "They're not ready to hurt you," Elias said when he returned. "They want you scared enough to sign those papers. Fear is cleaner than violence." "I'm already scared," Naomi admitted, wiping down tables more forcefully than necessary. "But I won't let fear make my decisions." "Good. Then let me teach you how to stay ahead of them." Elias gestured around the diner. "First rule, always know your exits. Back door through the kitchen, front door, storage room window that opens to the alley. Second rule, position yourself where you can't be trapped. Notice how I chose that booth? Clear view, multiple escape routes, solid wall behind me." Naomi paused her cleaning. "I don't want to live like this." "You already are living like this. I'm just helping you see the edges of it." For the next hour, while Lorraine finished the books, Elias shared basic security awareness. Never stand with your back to open space. Memorize faces, cars, patterns that feel wrong. Change daily routines, different routes to work, varying times, new habits that make you harder to predict. Naomi absorbed every detail, hating the necessity, but recognizing the wisdom. She thought of Isaiah walking to school, of the late-night shifts, of all the moments she'd felt watched but dismissed her instincts. The next morning arrived with heavy clouds threatening rain. Elias kept his distance, but remained visible as Naomi walked to work, demonstrating how to stay aware without looking paranoid. Every few blocks, she practiced his techniques, checking reflections in store windows, noting cars that lingered too long, identifying safe places to duck into if needed. The breakfast rush hit hard, testing Naomi's new awareness while juggling orders and demands. A plate crashed in the kitchen. A customer complained about cold eggs. The coffee maker chose that moment to malfunction. Through it all, Naomi maintained her calm exterior while scanning faces, watching doors, staying mobile. During a brief lull, Isaiah called from school. His voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before. "Some of those guys I've been hanging with," he said, "they're acting weird, being extra nice, asking about you. Said some men were asking questions about where you go, when you're alone." Naomi's throat tightened. "Stay away from them, Isaiah. Please." "Already did. But sis," he paused, "I get it now. Why you work so hard. They prey on people like us, don't they? Use our bills and dreams against us?" "Yes," she whispered, "but we're stronger than they think." After lunch, Naomi met Elias and Evelyn Price at the public library. The legal aid attorney had kind eyes behind practical glasses, and her weathered briefcase suggested years of fighting uphill battles. They found a quiet study room to examine the flash drive's contents. Evelyn's expression grew increasingly serious as she scrolled through document after document. "Your mother was thorough," she said finally. "These files show a clear pattern of predatory acquisition. Forged signatures, falsified code violations, targeted tax pressure on vulnerable homeowners. But what?" Naomi leaned forward. "It's not complete. We need supporting documentation, original deeds, dated correspondence, proof of Pike's direct involvement. Without corroboration, his lawyers will bury this in procedural challenges until everyone gives up." "Mom said something about the diner books mattering," Naomi recalled. "Could records be hidden there?" "Possibly. Your mother was clever. She understood paper trails, how to hide evidence in plain sight." Evelyn closed her laptop. "We need to search everything, especially places that seem ordinary." As evening approached, Elias insisted on walking Naomi home. The threat of rain had passed, leaving the air heavy and still. They walked in companionable silence until Elias spoke unexpectedly. "I should have protected him better," he said, voice rough with old pain. "My friend, your mother's friend. I knew he was onto something dangerous. Should have backed him up instead of telling him to be careful." Naomi glanced at his profile, seeing past the controlled exterior to the guilt he carried. For the first time, she truly looked at him, not as an intruder in her life or an unwanted protector, but as someone who understood loss and responsibility. "Sometimes," she said softly, "being careful isn't enough. Mom was careful. She still got sick. Life breaks through our defenses no matter what we do." Naomi stood in her dim kitchen the next morning, the copied names from the flash drive spread across her worn formica table. Steam rose from a bowl of oatmeal she'd made for Isaiah, topped with the last of their brown sugar. Her own stomach growled, but she ignored it, focused on the papers before her. Mrs. Martinez, Lot 247. The Hendersons, Lot 315. Old Mr. Washington's place on Oak Street. Each name represented a family pressured out of their homes, their stories hidden in her mother's careful documentation. "You're doing that thing again," Isaiah said from the doorway, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "What thing?" "Forgetting to eat while you try to save everyone else." He pushed the bowl toward her. "I grabbed a granola bar from my locker stash. You take this." Naomi smiled, touched by his concern. "When did you get so grown up?" "Someone had to," he shrugged, but his eyes were kind. "Be careful today, okay?" After Isaiah left for school, Naomi gathered the papers and headed to the diner. The morning air had a crisp edge, and she kept Elias's lessons in mind, staying alert, varying her route, checking reflections in shop windows as she walked. Elias was already waiting in his usual booth when she arrived, nursing a coffee. Lorraine worked the register, her silver hair neat despite the early hour. "Been thinking about what your mother said," Lorraine announced once Naomi had tied on her apron. "About the diner books mattering. Follow me." She led them to a storage room Naomi had passed 1,000 times, unlocking a door she'd never noticed. Inside, metal shelving units lined the walls, packed with cardboard boxes. "Never could bring myself to throw anything away," Lorraine admitted. "Order books, going back 15 years. Church fundraiser records. Every pie sale log and donation envelope since before you were born." Naomi stared at the wealth of information. "Mom knew you kept everything." "Your mother understood something most folks don't," Lorraine said. "Nobody pays attention to working women's papers. Receipt books, grocery lists, church notes, it's all just domestic clutter to important men." They spent the morning between customers sorting through the boxes, creating piles on an empty table in the back. Elias proved surprisingly methodical, organizing everything by date, while Naomi began recognizing patterns in her mother's careful notations. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a pie sale log. "See these little marks beside certain names? They match addresses from the flash drive. And here," she pulled out a church donation envelope. "The inspector who condemned the Rodriguez property is listed as a special contributor the same week they lost their house." Elias leaned closer. "Your mother was building a timeline." "More than that." Naomi grabbed another stack. "These recipe cards, they're coded. Every time there was a funeral or benefit dinner for someone who lost their home, she wrote down who attended. The same lawyers show up, watching who needs help, who's vulnerable. Hour by hour, they piece together her mother's careful documentation." Naomi found herself explaining local connections Elias would never have understood. Which families were related, who attended which church, how pressure on one household rippled through entire streets. "Your memory is incredible," Elias remarked as she identified another pattern. "You know everyone's story. Mom taught me to pay attention to people, not just their orders." Naomi paused over a familiar name. "She always said kindness means remembering details, who takes sugar in their coffee, whose kids have allergies, which regulars eat alone on holidays." By afternoon, they had clear evidence of Pike's method. Target elderly homeowners first, then pressure surrounding properties using code violations and tax liens. Create fear, offer quick cash for quick signatures, and sweep whole blocks into his development plans. Isaiah arrived after school, bringing news. "I talked to Marcus from the basketball team. His grandmother lost her house last month. Same pattern. Says he's got cousins with similar stories." "You're willing to help?" Naomi asked carefully. "Been thinking about what you said." Isaiah pulled up a chair. "About being stronger than they think. Plus, these are my neighbors, too. I know kids whose families got pushed out. They'll talk to me." Naomi squeezed his hand, proud of his growth and grateful for his support. As evening approached, they had filled 3 notebooks with connected names, dates, and patterns. Naomi's head ached from concentration, But she couldn't stop. One more box, one more ledger. Her mother's voice seemed to whisper from every page. Then she found it, a recipe card for sweet potato pie, dated 3 months before her mother died. On the back, in her mother's neat hand, Dorian Pike attended Henderson funeral, watched from back pew. Same man behind Martina's eviction, Washington foreclosure. Same pattern every time. Must stop him before he takes more. Naomi's hands trembled. She knew. She knew exactly who she was fighting. And now we can prove it, Elias said quietly. The recipe card was more than evidence. It was vindication. Her mother hadn't been paranoid or confused in her final months. She'd been methodically documenting a predator, using the very tools he overlooked, because they seemed beneath his notice. Morning light was just breaking when Naomi hurried up the weathered steps of the legal aid office, clutching her mother's recipe card and a thick folder of copied records. Her diner uniform was already on beneath her coat. She'd need to head straight to work after this meeting. Evelyn Price sat behind a desk crowded with case files, her reading glasses perched low on her nose. She looked tired, but alert, as she examined each document Naomi and Elias presented. "This is remarkably thorough," Evelyn said, spreading out the papers. "Your mother had an organized mind. She knew no one would look twice at recipe cards and church notes," Naomi explained. "Smart woman." Evelyn picked up the sweet potato pie recipe with Pike's name. "This isn't just about individual properties anymore. The pattern shows systematic fraud and coercion targeting vulnerable homeowners." Elias leaned forward. "Can we build a case?" "With willing witnesses, yes." Evelyn removed her glasses. "But we need people brave enough to testify. Pike has friends in local government. He'll fight back hard." "I know where to start," Naomi said quietly. After leaving Evelyn's office, Naomi barely made it to her shift on time. The morning rush kept her moving between tables, but her mind worked through a mental list of people to approach. Between coffee refills and orders, she watched the diner's regular crowd with new eyes, seeing not just customers, but potential allies. During her break, she walked 3 blocks to visit Mrs. Wilson, an elderly widow who'd been coming to the diner for 20 years. The old woman's small house was immaculate, with lace curtains and carefully tended flowers. "Your mother used to sit right where you are," Mrs. Wilson said, serving tea in delicate cups. "She'd listen to my worries about those men who kept coming round, writing everything down in her little notebook." "What men?" Naomi asked gently. "Building inspectors," they said. "But they only came after I refused to sell." Mrs. Wilson's hands shook slightly. "Your mother told me to keep copies of everything. Said truth needs proof to stand up straight." Across town, Isaiah was having similar conversations. He texted Naomi between classes about families who'd moved away after sudden code violations, broken pipes that appeared overnight, electrical problems no one could explain, citations for repairs they couldn't afford. Back at the diner, Lorraine worked her own quiet magic. She had a gift for reading people, knowing which regulars could be trusted with pieces of the truth. A retired teacher, a postal worker who'd served the neighborhood for decades, a church deacon whose congregation had lost several elderly members to suspicious relocations. "Communities got a long memory," Lorraine told Naomi as they restocked sugar packets. "People remember who helped them, who hurt them. We just need to remind them they're stronger together than afraid alone." During the afternoon lull, Elias spread out a map of property acquisitions on the breakroom table. "See the pattern? Pike's company buys one strategic property, then creates pressure on surrounding homes. Once people start selling, he combines lots for luxury developments." Naomi traced the familiar street names. "But if we expose the fraud, the development deals could fall apart," Elias finished. "The pressure to sell would stop. People who lost homes through coercion might have legal recourse. My mother's work wouldn't have been for nothing, Naomi said softly. Elias touched her hand briefly. She'd be proud of you. They worked side by side through the day, moving between Naomi's regular duties and quiet conversations with potential witnesses. There was something intimate about the partnership, built not on dramatic gestures but shared purpose. Naomi found herself noticing small things, how Elias always positioned himself to watch the door, how he remembered every detail people shared, how his presence made her feel both protected and respected. The diner became their unofficial headquarters. Lorraine kept coffee flowing and turned a blind eye when conversations ran long. Isaiah stopped by after school with more names and stories. Evelyn called twice with legal questions. Even Mrs. Wilson came in for pie and brought photographs documenting changes to her property before and after the pressure began. By closing time, they had a growing list of people willing to speak up. Naomi's mother's careful documentation was becoming a foundation for something larger. Not just evidence, but community resistance. Later that night, Naomi sat on her porch steps, too wired to sleep despite exhaustion. The street was quiet except for distant traffic and the soft creak of her mother's old porch swing. Elias stood at the railing, his profile sharp against the darkness. "I came to town looking for answers about my friend," he said, breaking their comfortable silence. "But staying feels right now like unfinished business becoming new purpose." Naomi watched him, seeing not just the protective former SEAL, but a man finding his own path to healing through helping others. She didn't tell him to leave. Instead, she moved over on the steps, making space beside her in the quiet night. Morning sunlight streamed through Naomi's kitchen window, catching dust motes in golden beams. The smell of slightly burnt toast filled the air as Isaiah scraped desperately at blackened bread over the sink. "I swear it was only in for a minute," he protested, making Naomi laugh. "Here, let me help." She took the toast from him, scraping away the worst of the char. "Remember when Mom used to say burnt toast builds character? She just said that because she couldn't cook either." Isaiah grinned, a rare moment of lightness crossing his face. For a precious few minutes, the weight of their situation lifted. They were just a sister and brother sharing breakfast, the house feeling like the home it used to be rather than a fortress under siege. Naomi savored the moment, watching Isaiah devour his salvaged toast with teenage enthusiasm. By mid-morning, the calm gave way to purposeful energy. Evelyn Price called while Naomi was between diner orders, her voice carrying cautious optimism. "I've drafted the initial filing," Evelyn said. "The pattern of code violations alone raises serious questions. Add in the witness statements we're gathering, and Pike has a real problem. How many people do we need?" Naomi balanced the phone while refilling coffee cups. "Quality matters more than quantity. 3 solid testimonies backed by documentation could be enough to trigger an investigation." More good news followed. A journalist from the regional paper agreed to review their evidence, mentioning past interest in Pike's development projects. Lorraine, watching Naomi's face brighten with each small victory, made her own contribution. "Use the diner," she said firmly, wiping down the counter. "Sunday evening, after closing. People feel safe here. Always have." "Lorraine, I can't put you at risk. Honey, I've been here 30 years. This place has weathered worse than Dorian Pike." Lorraine's eyes crinkled. "Besides, somebody's got to feed people while they're telling their stories." The afternoon found Naomi and Elias in the diner's back office, surrounded by papers. They worked in comfortable synchronization. Elias organizing documentation, while Naomi matched names to dates and locations. Their hands brushed occasionally as they passed files back and forth, each touch carrying a current of awareness neither acknowledged directly. "Mrs. Wilson's photos match the timing in your mother's notes, Elias said, spreading images across the desk. See the progression? First the mysterious pipe burst, then the electrical citations. Mom always said coincidences stop being coincidental when they make somebody money. Naomi leaned closer, her shoulder touching his as she studied the timeline. The office door burst open, making them jump apart. Isaiah bounded in, breathless with excitement. 3 more, he announced. Mr. Cooper from the church, Mrs. Martinez, who used to run the daycare, and old Mr. Washington. They all remember Mom helping them with paperwork. They want to speak at the meeting. Naomi hugged her brother impulsively. You did this? They trust you, Isaiah said. Because they trusted Mom. Mr. Washington said she used to bring him soup when his arthritis was bad. For the first time in years, Naomi felt the future opening instead of closing. Standing in the familiar diner office, surrounded by evidence of her mother's quiet resistance, she allowed herself to imagine possibilities. Maybe the house could breathe again. Windows opened wide, fresh paint brightening worn walls, flowers pushing through the neglected garden soil. Maybe Isaiah could focus on college applications instead of overdue notices. Her gaze drifted to Elias, who was listening intently as Isaiah described his conversations with neighbors. During a lull, he caught her looking and held her eyes. Got an interesting call earlier, he said casually. Security contractor offering 3 months' work out of state. Good money? Naomi's heart stuttered. Oh? Turned them down. His voice was steady. Some things matter more than money. Some places, too. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Lorraine's voice calling for help with the dinner rush broke the spell, but something had shifted. Their careful dance of professional distance felt increasingly like pretense. The rest of the day passed in focused preparation. They copied key documents, organized testimony notes, and mapped out Sunday's meeting. Hope filled the diner like another presence, making even routine tasks feel significant. Naomi caught herself humming as she served plates, drawing surprised smiles from regular customers. Late evening found them finishing the last details. Elias double-checked the meeting security plan, while Naomi and Lorraine discussed seating arrangements. Isaiah had gone home earlier to complete a school assignment, leaving them with quiet satisfaction in their progress. I think we're ready, Naomi said, gathering her purse as Lorraine counted the register. More than ready, Elias agreed, moving to check the locks one final time. His voice changed abruptly. Naomi? She joined him at the kitchen's back entrance. The deadbolt that had been secure an hour ago now hung loosely from the doorframe, its screws scattered across the floor. Chapter 10. When Dreams Shatter. The loose deadbolt was only the beginning. Early the next morning, Elias burst through the diner's back entrance, his military training evident in his swift, precise movements. The kitchen's familiar warmth had been replaced by something wrong, an acrid chemical smell that shouldn't be there. Don't touch anything, he called to Naomi, who had just arrived for opening. His eyes scanned the industrial shelving units where cleaning supplies were stored. Several bottles had been tampered with, their seals broken. In the walk-in cooler, meat packages showed signs of puncture. Someone had systematically contaminated their inventory. What is it? Naomi asked, her voice tight with worry. Before Elias could answer, a sharp knock echoed from the front door. 2 health inspectors stood outside, their faces stern beneath official caps. Lorraine arrived just in time to see them enter, clipboards ready. This is an unscheduled inspection, the lead inspector announced, already pulling on latex gloves. We received an anonymous complaint. The next hour unfolded like a nightmare. The inspectors discovered everything: the compromised cleaning supplies, the contaminated food, suspicious residue on cooking surfaces. They took photographs, filled out violation forms, and shook their heads with practiced disapproval. Regular customers gathered outside, peering through windows as the inspectors posted a bright red closure notice on the door. Lorraine's hands shook as she called her staff to tell them not to come in. Naomi watched helplessly as curious onlookers pointed and whispered. "This will take weeks to resolve," Lorraine whispered, her usual toughness cracking. "The reinspection fees alone." Elias touched Naomi's arm. "I need to check your house. Now." She handed him her key, too overwhelmed to argue. 20 minutes later, his call confirmed her worst fears. "They've been inside," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You need to come home." The sight of her violated home hit Naomi like a physical blow. The front door lock had been professionally picked, leaving no obvious damage. Inside, drawers hung open like wounds. Family photos lay scattered, their frames cracked and broken. The box of her mother's papers had been dumped across the floor, pages trampled and torn. "The flash drive?" she asked. Elias shook his head. "Gone." But the real devastation lay in her mother's bedroom. They had ransacked it methodically, pulling apart her remaining clothes, dumping jewelry boxes, shredding the mattress. The violation felt deeply personal. Not just theft, but desecration. Naomi sank onto the stripped bed, holding one of her mother's old scarves. Why like this? They already had what they wanted. "To break your spirit," Elias said quietly. "Make you feel powerless." The phone rang. It was Evelyn Price, her voice heavy with regret. "Naomi, something's surfaced. Bank records, payment stubs. They seem to show your mother accepting regular payments from one of Pike's shell companies." "That's impossible," Naomi whispered. "They look legitimate, dated and notarized. I'm not saying I believe them, but it changes everything legally. We can't file with this kind of doubt hanging over our key witness." The journalist called next, apologetically withdrawing his interest. By noon, 3 of their potential witnesses had backed out. The carefully built case was collapsing like a house of cards. Isaiah came home from school early, having heard rumors about the diner. His face darkened when he saw Elias standing guard in their ruined living room. "This is because of you," Isaiah spat. "We were managing before you came. Now look, the diner's closed, our house is trashed, and Mom's reputation—" His voice cracked. "You brought them down on us, made us targets." "Isaiah, stop," Naomi pleaded. "No, he needs to go. His friend died fighting these people. Is that what you want for Naomi? For us?" The words hung in the air like poison. Naomi looked at Elias, saw the guilt and pain flash across his controlled features. She thought about Isaiah, about Lorraine's devastated face, about her mother's memory being twisted into something ugly. "He's right," she said softly. "You have to leave. Naomi, please." Her voice broke. "I can't watch anyone else get hurt. Not because of me." Elias stood very still, his jaw tight. Then he nodded once, respecting her choice, even as his whole body rejected it. He moved to the door, paused, and spoke without turning. "Whatever they're saying about your mother, it's lies. Remember that." After he left, the house felt both emptier and heavier. Isaiah retreated to his room, leaving Naomi alone with the wreckage of their lives. Hours later, she sat in the darkened diner, surrounded by stacked chairs and tomorrow's uncertainties. The closure notice glowed faintly in the streetlight, a neon badge of shame. The soft click of expensive shoes on tile made her look up. Dorian Pike stood in the shadows, his smile practiced and predatory. Without speaking, he placed a leather folder on the table before her. The empty diner felt like a church after a funeral. All that sacred space turned hollow. Naomi sat in her usual booth, the vinyl seat creaking beneath her. Stacked chairs cast long shadows in the dim light from the street, their silhouettes like silent mourners. Dorian Pike's shoes whispered across the tile floor as he approached. His expensive suit seemed to absorb what little light remained, making him look more shadow than man. Without invitation, he slid into the booth across from Naomi, his movements elegant and controlled. "Miss Reed," he said, his voice gentle as falling snow. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation." Naomi's fingers curled around her coffee cup, now cold and bitter. She didn't respond. "What happened today was unfortunate," Pike continued, smoothing his silk tie, "but necessary. Sometimes we need to see clearly what we stand to lose before we can appreciate what we're being offered." He placed a leather folder on the table between them, its surface gleaming like wet ink. "Inside this folder is everything you need to make this all go away. The tax lien on your mother's house, gone. The medical bills that keep you awake at night, erased. Isaiah's future, secured." Naomi's throat tightened at her brother's name. "I've looked into his academic record," Pike said, smile warming. "Bright boy. It would be a shame if financial barriers kept him from the right college. My foundation has connections with several excellent universities." The offer hung in the air like perfume, sweet and dizzying. Naomi thought of Isaiah's college applications scattered across their kitchen table, of his dreams barely surviving under the weight of their reality. "What do you want?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Two simple things." Pike opened the folder with manicured fingers. "First, sign over the property. A clean transfer, no complications. Second, make a brief statement acknowledging that your mother's records were, let's say, creatively enhanced. A moment of desperation, perhaps. Completely understandable given her medical bills at the time." Naomi's hands began to shake. The folder contained multiple documents, each with a bright yellow tab marking where she needed to sign. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind that made promises feel permanent. "Think about it," Pike urged softly. "One signature, one statement, and you're free. No more double shifts. No more choosing between medication and groceries. No more watching Isaiah carry the weight of your sacrifice." Every word landed like a precise blow against her weakest points. Naomi stared at the signature lines, each one a door to an easier life. Her vision blurred with exhaustion and unshed tears. Pike stood smoothly, adjusting his cuffs. "I'll give you tonight to consider it. But remember, this offer expires at dawn. After that, things become much less flexible." He walked away, footsteps fading into silence. The leather folder sat before her like a test or a trap. Naomi touched the first page, her finger tracing the blank line where her name would go. One signature. One public statement. A few moments of shame in exchange for security. Wasn't that a mother's choice too? Sacrificing pride for her child's future? She pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over the call button for Lorraine. The diner owner would understand choosing survival over principle. Most people would. But then her mother's voice echoed in her memory, clear as yesterday. "When people rush you in darkness, it's because truth cannot survive the light." Naomi's hand stilled on the page. Her mother had said that the night before she died, pressing a handful of papers into her bedside table drawer. At the time, Naomi had been too grief-stricken to understand. She sat up straighter, something crystallizing in her mind. Pike wouldn't be here, wouldn't be offering such generous terms if she had nothing left to threaten him with. He wouldn't waste time trying to buy her silence if she was already beaten. The leather folder suddenly looked different. Not a lifeline, but a confession of fear. Naomi reached for her phone again, this time scrolling to a different number. Her finger hesitated only a moment before pressing call. It rang 3 times before Elias answered. "Naomi?" His voice was alert despite the hour, as if he hadn't slept. "I need you to come back," she said quietly. "Not to rescue me. To stand with me while I finish what my mother started." The silence on his end felt charged with unspoken questions. "Pike was just here," she continued. "He offered to make everything go away if I signed some papers and say my mother lied." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing yet. But I remembered something my mother said about truth and darkness, and I think I know where she hid the real evidence. The kind that can't be stolen or forged." "I'll be there before dawn," Elias said without hesitation. Naomi stood, leaving Pike's folder untouched on the table. Outside, the night was beginning to soften, stars fading as the sky lightened degree by degree. She waited in the parking lot, watching the eastern horizon for the first hint of morning. Headlights approached just as color began bleeding into the clouds. Elias's truck pulled up beside her, engine rumbling to silence. He stepped out, his face showing no reproach for her earlier dismissal. "I know where we need to look," Naomi said, meeting his eyes in the growing light. Dawn painted the diner windows in pale gold as Naomi unlocked the front door. Elias entered first, checking the shadows before letting the others follow. Isaiah slouched against the counter, dark circles under his eyes suggesting a sleepless night. Lorraine moved straight to the office, her keys jingling with purpose. "My mother," Naomi began, her voice steady despite exhaustion, "never trusted anything that could be stolen or destroyed in one place." She spread her hands across the office desk, now cleared of its usual clutter. "She taught me to hide important things in plain sight, the way women like us always have." Lorraine nodded, pulling out dusty storage boxes. "Your mama was the smartest woman I knew, even if she never showed it off." "Each piece means something," Naomi explained, opening an old order ledger. "See this table number? 7. It shows up every time Pike's people visited someone about their property." Her finger traced down the column. "And look at the orders. Coffee, plain toast. No one orders just that unless they're scared to be seen talking." Isaiah leaned forward, his skepticism softening. "That's why she always worked the counter herself on Tuesdays?" "Yes," Naomi smiled sadly. "She could watch everything without looking like she was watching." Elias spread out his own notes, comparing dates. "The pattern matches what my friend documented. But your mother's version is harder to discredit because it's woven into daily life." They worked methodically through the morning. Lorraine retrieved more boxes from storage, each containing years of careful observation disguised as routine paperwork. Isaiah, his natural intelligence finding purpose, created a map of affected properties using addresses hidden in donation records. "The pie sales," Naomi explained, showing them a thick binder. Every time someone faced pressure about their property, Mama recorded it as a special order. The price matched the lot number, and the type of pie marked how they were approached. She pointed to specific entries. Apple meant legal threats. Cherry was job offers that felt like bribes. Pecan meant they involved someone's children. Elias photographed each page, his hands gentle with the worn paper. "This is brilliant. Pike's people would never think to check dessert records for evidence." "Church donation envelopes," Naomi continued, opening another box. "Mama kept them all because the dates and amounts track when people were forced out. Small donations stopped suddenly when families disappeared. Larger ones appeared from newcomers who shouldn't have had that kind of money. They worked through lunch, nobody wanting to break the momentum." Isaiah organized the properties by date, revealing how Pike's pattern spread through the neighborhood like a slow poison. Lorraine's memory filled gaps, recalling faces and conversations that brought the numbers to life. Near 2 o'clock, Evelyn Price arrived, summoned by Naomi's urgent message. The attorney's skepticism faded as Naomi walked her through the evidence system. "This is remarkable," Evelyn said, examining a cross-reference timeline Isaiah had created. "It's not just numbers. It's a community's story told through their daily lives. Pike can't dismiss this as forgery because it's documented in real time." witnessed by dozens of people. Will it be enough? Naomi asked. Evelyn nodded slowly. With this level of detail and corroboration, yes. The zoning board has to hold a public hearing before approving Pike's redevelopment plan. I can get you on the schedule for tomorrow evening. Hope bloomed in Naomi's chest, cautious but real. How many copies should we make? All of them, Evelyn advised. And store them in different places. Once Pike realizes what's happening, he'll try to contain it. They spent the afternoon carefully copying everything. Elias created digital backups, while Isaiah and Lorraine sorted physical documents into separate boxes. Naomi reviewed each set, ensuring the pattern remained clear even when split apart. Your mother built this case for years, Elias said quietly as they worked. Every single day, she chose to pay attention and keep record. She knew someone would need the truth eventually, Naomi replied. She just didn't know it would be me. As evening approached, they began moving boxes out to different vehicles. Evelyn took one set for safekeeping. Lorraine would store another at her sister's house. Isaiah insisted on delivering copies to trusted neighbors who had already agreed to testify. Through the diner windows, Naomi noticed a familiar dark sedan cruise past, slowing as its occupants observed the activity. Let them watch, she thought. The truth was already beyond their reach, scattered like seeds that would take root in too many places to control. They'll try to stop us before the hearing, Elias warned, noting her gaze. I know, Naomi said, but they can't steal what they can't find. And they never thought to look at pie recipes and coffee orders for evidence of their crimes. The last box held the original ledgers, her mother's actual handwriting, her real-time witnessing of injustice. These would go home with Naomi, hidden in plain sight among her cookbooks and family albums. Tomorrow they would become public record, but tonight they remained what they had always been. One woman's quiet resistance, preserved in the ordinary details of serving others. Twilight settled over the neighborhood as Naomi's kitchen became a command center. Papers covered every surface, organized in careful stacks that told her mother's hidden story. The overhead light cast warm shadows across Isaiah's face as he sorted through another pile of testimonies. His phone buzzed. Isaiah's expression darkened as he read the message. Marcus and them, he said, naming boys he'd been drifting toward months ago. They're saying I should tell you to back off, that things could get bad. Naomi set down the folder she'd been reviewing. Elias watched from his position near the window, alert, but letting her handle this moment with her brother. Come here, she said softly. Isaiah hesitated, then joined her at the table. She pulled out an old photo from her mother's papers, one showing their mother outside the house, young and proud when they'd first moved in. You were too little to remember, but Mama worked 3 jobs to buy this place, Naomi began. Not because it was perfect, it needed work even then. She wanted it because it meant having roots, giving us something solid to stand on. Isaiah traced the edge of the photo. That's why she started keeping records? Because of the house? No, baby. She started because Mrs. Thompson down the street lost her home to fake code violations after 50 years living there. Then the Wilsons got forced out by sudden tax bills that made no sense. Mama saw how fear works, how it makes people feel alone even when they're all fighting the same enemy. But she died anyway, Isaiah said, voice tight. All that courage, and we still almost lost everything. Listen to me. Naomi took his hands. Fear gets louder when lies are about to break. These threats, these warnings, they're coming because Pike knows he's losing control. Mama didn't die for nothing. She left us a map to finish what she started. Isaiah squeezed her hands back. I want to speak at the hearing, not just as a kid you're protecting, as someone who saw what this did to our family. Pride bloomed in Naomi's chest. You sure? Yeah. He straightened. Those boys trying to scare me. Their families got pushed out too. They're just scared to admit it. The phone started ringing then, anonymous calls to witnesses who'd agreed to testify. Each time, Naomi or Isaiah reached out to reassure them, to remind them they weren't alone anymore. Elias coordinated with neighbors who'd organized informal patrols, watching for Pike's people. As night deepened, Isaiah finally went to bed, leaving Naomi and Elias at the kitchen table. Papers rustled as they prepared speaking orders for the hearing. Their hands brushed occasionally, the touch no longer startling. "That first day in the diner," Elias said quietly, "pretending to be your husband was tactical. A way to throw off Pike's man without causing a scene." Naomi looked up, caught by the gentle weight in his voice. "But staying?" he continued. "That started the moment I saw you stand your ground. When you refused to break even with everything stacked against you. I used to think I felt safe because you knew how to handle danger," Naomi admitted. "But it's more than that. You saw me, really saw me, when I was just trying to stay invisible enough to survive." "You were never invisible," Elias said. "Not to people who mattered." Their fingers linked across scattered papers, the touch saying things they weren't ready to voice. The moment held, warm and honest, until Naomi's phone lit up with an urgent text from Lorraine. "Smoke behind the diner," she read, standing quickly. "Someone tried to—" Elias was already moving. "I'll drive." They reached the diner in minutes. The smell of gasoline lingered, but there was no fire. "Mr. Peterson from the barber shop next door had spotted the attempt early. He stood with other neighbors who'd come running when he raised the alarm. Saw 2 men in hoodies, Mr. Peterson reported, but they ran when people started coming out with phones recording. Got it all on video," Mrs. Chen from the corner store added, holding up her phone. "Clear shot of their car, too." Naomi looked around at the gathered faces, people who'd lived here for generations, who'd watched each other's children grow up. They weren't hiding behind locked doors anymore. They were standing guard. "Pike's getting desperate," Elias murmured, checking the scorch marks where the fire had barely caught. "Good," Naomi said firmly. "Let him see what happens when people stop being afraid alone and start being brave together." The neighbors stayed until the police took statements, then dispersed slowly, many promising to attend tomorrow's hearing. Lorraine hugged Naomi tightly before leaving. "Your mama would be so proud," she whispered. "Not just of what you're doing, but of who you've become while doing it." Standing in the quiet after everyone left, Naomi studied the diner's dark windows. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. But tonight had already proven something vital. The neighborhood was awake, watching, and ready to protect its own. "Time to go home," Elias said gently. "Tomorrow needs us ready." Naomi nodded, turning away from the diner. The night air carried wood smoke from distant chimneys, the familiar scent of home. Not just her home anymore, but a whole community's home, worth every risk to defend. Morning light streamed through tall windows into the municipal hearing room, catching dust motes in golden beams. Every seat was filled, with people standing along the walls and spilling into the hallway. The air felt thick with tension and possibility. Dorian Pike sat at the front with his legal team, their expensive suits and leather briefcases, marking them as different from the working people who filled the room. His smile remained perfectly controlled, though his eyes kept drifting to the door. When Naomi entered, that smile flickered. She wasn't alone or scattered. Elias walked beside her, carrying organized folders. Isaiah and Lorraine followed with more boxes. Behind them came a steady stream of familiar faces. Diner regulars, church members, displaced neighbors, and shop owners from the old neighborhood. "Please state your name for the record," the hearing officer instructed once everyone was seated. Naomi stood, her voice clear and steady. "Naomi Reed. I'm here about my mother's house, but really, I'm here about all our houses." She didn't try to sound polished or technical. Instead, she spoke directly, the way she'd talk to someone over coffee at the diner. "My mother worked at Lorraine's diner for 20 years, she began. She served meals, but she also served as a witness. When elderly neighbors started losing homes to sudden code violations, when families got pressured with paperwork they didn't understand, they came to her. She listened, she documented, and she left us a way to prove what was happening." Pike's attorney stood. Objection. These are emotional appeals without substance. "If I may," Evelyn Price interrupted, rising from her seat, "we have extensive documentation." She gestured to the boxes. "Ms. Reed has decoded a comprehensive record-keeping system her mother maintained through years of diner ledgers, community fundraiser logs, and church donation records." Naomi explained how the system worked, how table numbers matched property addresses, how pie orders tracked intimidation visits, how donation envelopes dated legal threats. With each example, she connected faces in the room to entries in the books. Lorraine stepped forward next, her voice wavering but determined. "I watched Marie Reed take these notes for years. Thought she was just being thorough about the diner business. Now I understand she was protecting evidence the only way a working woman could, by hiding it in plain sight, where no one important would think to look." Isaiah's testimony hit harder because he spoke without anger, only truth. These aren't just papers to us. Each entry is someone's grandmother losing her home, someone's kids having to change schools, someone's family being erased from the neighborhood they helped build. He introduced residents one by one. Mrs. Thompson stood shakily, describing how men appeared at her door with papers she couldn't read. Mr. Wilson explained mysterious tax bills that tripled overnight. Young mothers told of playground conversations where Pike's people suggested their children might be safer in different schools. Pike's composed expression cracked slightly as each story connected to specific dates and locations in the ledgers. His attorney shuffled papers nervously. Then Elias took the stand. His military bearing commanded attention as he outlined the investigation his late friend had started, tracking shell companies and falsified documents back to Pike Development. "The enforcer who's been pressuring Ms. Reed," Elias said clearly, "appears in multiple witness accounts." He pointed to a man trying to slip out the back of the room. "That man right there." Security stopped the enforcer at the door. Under rapid questioning, faced with dated photos and witness statements, he began to stumble over his rehearsed denials. "Mr. Pike said it was all legal," he muttered. "Said no one would believe them anyway." Pike's attorney shot to his feet, but Evelyn was faster. "Before we hear objections, I have one final piece of evidence." She removed a sealed envelope from her briefcase. "This affidavit was filed with my office by Marie Reed 3 years ago, with instructions to release it if anything happened to her unexpectedly." The room went absolutely still. Pike's confident mask shattered. "The affidavit details specific instances of fraud, forgery, and coercion," Evelyn continued. "It names Dorian Pike directly and includes copies of original documents Ms. Reed managed to preserve before they were altered." The hearing officer reviewed the affidavit, his expression darkening. "In light of this evidence, I am immediately suspending the redevelopment vote pending criminal investigation." Pike surged to his feet, composure gone. "This is absurd. You can't possibly—" 2 police officers moved toward him as the officer continued. "Mr. Pike, please remain in the room. There are some serious questions." Naomi watched Pike's desperate glance toward the exits, saw the moment he realized he was trapped, not by force or threats, the weapons he understood, but by simple truth written in her mother's careful hand, preserved in pie orders and coffee stains and the stubborn memories of people who refused to disappear. The room erupted in confusion as more officers entered. Pike's legal team scattered, trying to distance themselves. The enforcer was already in handcuffs, but Naomi didn't focus on them. Instead, she watched her neighbors hugging, crying, pulling out phones to share the news with those who couldn't attend. Isaiah gripped her hand. Elias stood protectively close. Lorraine wiped tears with her apron. Together, they witnessed the moment power shifted, when years of quiet courage finally spoke louder than money and intimidation. Evening settled over the town like a gentle exhale after the explosive hearing. News vans were still parked along Main Street, their crews filming wrap-up segments about the local waitress who helped expose a corrupt developer. But inside Naomi's small house, the victory felt more personal than public. "They're holding him without bail," Elias reported, hanging up his phone. "The DA thinks Pike might try to flee if released." Naomi sat at her kitchen table, still wearing the same dress she'd worn to the hearing. Empty takeout containers cluttered the surface. None of them had felt like cooking after such an intense day. "What about the houses?" she asked. "The county executive issued an emergency stay," Elias explained, settling into the chair beside her. "No evictions or property transfers can go through until they've reviewed everything. Evelyn says that could take months, maybe longer. It gives people time to fight back." Isaiah burst through the front door, nearly vibrating with excitement. "You won't believe this. The news is everywhere. People keep calling the church, asking how to help. Pastor Matthews says they're starting a scholarship fund for kids from affected families." His eyes shone. "He wants me to help organize it." Naomi reached for her brother's hand. "I'm so proud of you. The way you stood up there today, helping those families tell their stories." "I learned from you," Isaiah said quietly. "Both of you." He glanced at their mother's photograph on the wall. "All of you." The phone rang again. It had been ringing all evening. This time it was Lorraine, her voice thick with emotion. "The Chamber of Commerce called. They're offering emergency grants to help fix up the diner, and people keep dropping off donations at the door. One envelope had $500 in it." "That's wonderful," Naomi said, tears pricking her eyes. "When can we reopen?" "Give me 3 days to clean and restock. The health inspector's coming back tomorrow. A different one this time, not Pike's man." Lorraine paused. "Your mama would be so proud, honey. Everyone knows the truth now." After they hung up, Naomi walked to her mother's room. The mess from the break-in was cleaned up, but she could still feel the violation. Yet somehow it mattered less now. The truth had survived, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Elias appeared in the doorway. "You okay?" "Better than okay," she said. "Just thinking about everything that changed today." "Speaking of change," he stepped into the room, something small glinting in his palm. "I should return this." The ring, the one he'd given her during their desperate charade at the diner. Naomi had almost forgotten she was still wearing it. "I got a call earlier," he continued. "Security contractor job overseas. Good money. Familiar work." Naomi's heart stumbled. "When do you leave?" "I don't." His eyes held hers steadily. "I turned it down. There's work to do here, helping people rebuild, making sure Pike's other projects get investigated. Besides," he took a deep breath, "I was hoping maybe we could try something real this time. No pretending, no fear, just truth." He held out the ring. "I'm not proposing, not yet. But I am asking if you'd consider building a future together. One where neither of us has to carry everything alone." Naomi looked at the ring, remembering how it had felt like a shield when she first put it on. Now it felt like a promise. "Yes," she said simply. "I'd like that." Isaiah's voice carried from the kitchen. "If you two are having a moment, can it wait?" "Mrs. Thompson brought over her famous peach cobbler." They laughed, tension breaking. This was what victory really looked like. Not just justice served, but family preserved, community restored, love grown from courage instead of fear. 3 months later, the diner hummed with renewed life. Fresh paint brightened the walls, new booths replaced the worn ones, and a framed newspaper article about Marie Reed's vindication hung beside the counter. Every Wednesday evening, they hosted a free legal clinic and community support night. Evelyn Price volunteered her time, helping residents understand their rights. Isaiah mentored younger kids while working on his college applications. Naomi moved between tables with practiced grace. But now she wore both the old ring and a new one Elias had given her last week. She noticed everything differently. Not through fear's lens, but with the sharp awareness that came from knowing her own strength. Lorraine worked the register, calling out orders with renewed energy. 2 blue plate specials for table 6. And Naomi, honey, check on that young woman who just came in, the one sitting alone. Naomi turned. A girl barely out of her teens huddled in the corner booth, clutching her purse, eyes darting toward the door like she expected trouble to walk through it any minute. Naomi recognized that look. She'd worn it herself not so long ago. Without hesitation, she grabbed a coffee pot and headed to the booth. The girl flinched slightly when Naomi approached, but something in Naomi's gentle smile made her relax. "You're safe," Naomi said softly, sliding into the seat across from her. "Sit with me. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day."